Hello, I'm going to now introduce you to Caron Barruw. Caron is a psychotherapist. She's going to tell us a little bit more about herself. So welcome, Caron. I'm now bringing you into view.
Thank you. I'm Caron Barruw, qualified psychotherapist, trained and licensed in the USA, been in the UK for the last 20 years, part of the BACP. And one of my specialties in my practice is working with families of all sorts. And specializing in couples and relationships and how to help couples resolve the issues of bringing together either blended families or conflicting marriage families or whatever the system that needs to change within families are. So that really is my passion. And I guess watching people change the way they live their lives is, for me, an extremely rewarding part of what I do. There's a very famous researcher called Judith Wallerstein, who's one of the most respected divorce researchers in the world, actually. And about 5 years ago, she published a book where she had followed children of divorce for 30 years, and some of them even longer, and had then interviewed them all through the stages of the divorce and the impact that the divorce had on them. And I guess the best conclusion from this is that it is not the divorce that hurts children. It is the war between the parents. And one of my greatest passions is to work with the couple, to work out the anger, the loss, the feeling around letting go of a dream, so that they have a neutral slate to co-parent their children, so that their children don't land up growing up in a war zone. Because it is that war zone that damages the children. So one of my greatest missions with couples of any stages is, sometimes even married couples who warring all the time, they're actually living like divorced couples within a marriage. So, and often what I do see is people will get divorced, and I've had couples who've come to me 10 years after their divorce, and they're still basically in the marriage. They're just living in separate homes as separate partners, but when it comes to dealing with each other and the war that the children are involved in, because the children become the target of the war, they're almost living the exact same as they were in the marriage, and they get quite shocked when I say that to them. But then we start to unpack the war. So the best present any divorcing or conflicting relationship can give to their children is to work out their own anger on their own without their children, and help the children grow up in an environment that's safe emotionally for them. You brought your children into the world, and it is your responsibility to provide a safe, loving environment for your children, where they don't have to choose between a mommy and a daddy. They don't have to choose between who's more important, and integrating other partners, because the smaller the war, the better integrated the other partners are as well.
Thank you, Caron. I wanted to ask specifically about the challenges of co-parenting. So when you've got other partners on the scene, because that does seem to be a huge issue. What are the kind of common mistakes people make that you could help them avoid, particularly also helping people to understand things from the child's point of view?
So, it's very interesting, that co-parenting, because I'm going to start with married couples. Most married couples do not work on the same page in parenting. So no matter how good your relationship is, you will always have conflict about what kind of parenting values, parenting systems, because it's all learned from your family of origin. So right away in the marriage, you're starting off with two parents who probably think quite differently. The issue is that when they disagree, they're living in the same house. So they can go to each other and say, listen, did you tell Sally she can go to a concert by herself with her friends? Yeah, well, I didn't think it was a big deal. So they can work it out and work through the conflict, sometimes maybe not, and come to sort of some kind of resolution, because they're living in the house, and they can pull the child or the teenager or whatever it is in and have a family discussion. The problem with co-parenting, with parents who live in different homes, and there's a huge difference in this, in parents who are warring and parents who aren't warring. the number one rule I set up with every single couple that I work with, whether they're warring or not, is no decisions are made without consulting the other parent, because children are genius at splitting. So if the child asks mommy for something and mommy says no, and then when they go to daddy, daddy says yes, the child then very quickly learns that they've established quite a good system. I mean, I've actually, once parents started talking to each other, found that kids who were getting double pocket money, double presents, double things that neither one of the parents ever bothered to check with the other one if they were actually getting that. So the number one rule, whether you hate each other, love each other, or tolerate each other, is for the sake of your child. If you can set up, and luckily today we don't have to talk to each other. We've got email, text, messaging. And as long as it's not abusive, because sometimes parents will use the co-parenting as a war game to hurt the other one or have power over the other one, and then the co-parenting actually becomes destructive. So one of the things that needs to take place is, in couples who aren't warring, there's no reason to not send each other a message about, things that the child asks for, or the value systems, or how they want to co-parent together. So it's much easier to co-parent in a non-warring situation, because you can have a meeting, you can sit down and discuss big things together. With warring couples, if there is a rule that you only discuss like a one-liner, does Sally have piano lesson today? Yeah, it's a one-liner, because Sally's told me she doesn't have to go, but of course Sally has to go, and the mother's paid for it, but Sally's told Dad there is no piano lesson, which then becomes a massive explosion because the system is so fragile. So the goal of co-parenting is to create a safety net where children can feel safe, coming from both homes and both parents. Because I'm a systemic therapist, I work with the system. So the majority of work that I do is with the adults, although I will have family meetings on behalf of the children with the adults to find out what the issues are. So I will bring the children in with the session with the adults, really to find out what the child thinks, and then I'll often refer the children to somebody else, because they don't want to see the same therapist as their parents. But when I do a family meeting together, the main issue that the children have is that they don't know who to trust and believe. Because if parents are fighting and warring, and everybody's playing, and I'm talking about the warring parents, not necessarily the ones who are okay working together, but the non-working together, the child feels like they're always in the middle. So even something simply like they have a birthday party and it's the other parent's weekend, and they're too scared to ask the other parent, and the mother doesn't want to ask the father, and then the child always feels like they're drowning in the middle. And so the most important responsibility for the adults is to look at the children's needs, not what your need is, but what is my child need? My child needs a system whereby they can talk to the one parent and then talk to the other parent, and not feel like it's a competition between who gets to say yes or no. And that's really what really destroys children. So if the parents can find some mechanism whereby the child needs come above their needs, the system can potentially calm down.
Particularly referring to longer term studies, what actually happens to children when the parents continue to war and don't manage to sort all of that out?
Well, I have a whole caseload of those 30, 40, 50, 60-year-olds. They'll end up divorced. They'll end up not trusting relationships. They'll end up not settling down, believing that love can be calm and quiet. They grow up believing that love is war. And then they will replicate that in their future relationships, where they will end up in warring relationships, and getting divorced is an option because they haven't actually seen what it feels like to be in a safe marriage. Even if one of the or both of the partners get remarried in a less conflictual relationship, if their primary family, the parents, are continuing to war, the message to the child is that relationships are war. So I often get people in their 50s who've been married 3 or 4 times, and when I do their family of origin history, they'll tell me that their parents hated each other, got divorced, lived in separate houses, had a war their whole lives. So they don't feel safe that a marriage is something that's a loving, warm, holding space. It's actually a scary thing that's going to implode at any minute.
So it really is vital to get it right. But of course, we're all human. We all mess up as parents at the best of times.
You see, here's the hope. The hope is that children forgive very quickly, and that every single child wants to have a happy mommy and daddy, no matter how old they are. And I've had 30, 40-year-olds tell me that. So if parents realize that, let's say you have been warring and had a really toxic relationship with your ex, it's never ever too late to stop it. Because the child, as soon as they see the shift, it's what they've always wanted. So they'll test it in the beginning to make sure it's real, but as soon as they feel it is real, they very quickly shift into a healthier system of a non-warring relationship. So the hope for parents is that it's never too late to stop the war.